I have a program in front of me, Jim, that I received.
I got a program here.
I know how to make you happy. I got a program here, big boy. I actually am not sure what year it is, and I could look it up, and I can go find it, but I figured why not just talk to you about it, and we'll figure it out on the air live.
Sounds like a good deal to me.
So this is Tuesday, March 25th, wrestling news from Louisville, Kentucky, the Armory.
Oh.
Devoted to wrestling, the only year-round sport. So I'll read you the card, which is spread across several pages. The first main bout, 1 hour, 2 out of 3 falls. Is that the first bout listed? Let me just double check that. Yep. The first main bout, 1 hour, 2 out of 3 falls. Chief Little Eagle, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 222 pounds, versus Jerry Atkins, 220 pounds, Canada. In a special attraction main bout number 2, 2 out of 3 falls, Miss Penny Banner, 146 pounds, St. Louis, Missouri, versus Miss Jessica Rogers, 142 pounds, Chicago, Illinois. And finally, the main bout, 1 hour, 2 out of 3 falls, Corsica Joe and Corsica Jean versus the Mighty Atlas and Joe Scarpa. And the promoter is Wee Willie Davis. The state commissioners are Bernard Bax, Francis Bauman, and Reed Miller. And of course, the box office are the McDonoughs. The announcer is George Lewis. Try to see what other clues are in here to the year.
George Lewis was the longtime ring announcer going back to the days of Haywood Allen and the Allen Athletic Club. And the McDonoughs doing the box office, Francis McDonough was Haywood Allen's assistant that took over the promotion when Haywood Allen retired. And Francis McDonough passed away in 1956, whereupon I'm sure his wife or son or kids, whatever, still worked the box office there.
Well,
Wee Willie Davis, go ahead.
Then I got to make this announcement. You're right there. The box office is Betty McDonough and Ray McDonough.
Okay. And Wee Willie Davis took over the local promotion briefly, as it turned out, he established a local company called the Goldenrod Athletic Club, because Wee Willie Davis not only was a famous wrestler, he was one of the guys who had the tug of war with Mighty Joe Young in the movie. He was 6'7" or 8 or 9 and 300 something pounds back in those days. But also he was an expert on flowers and had been on, what was it, the $64,000 Question or one of the game shows in the 50s. That was maybe it was his I've Got a Secret, because he was a flower expert. So he named it the Goldenrod Athletic Club. And he tried to promote on his own for a little while, and then started being more the figurehead local promoter for Barnett's Indianapolis office. So having said that, since he was listed as the promoter, since this was a small card with not a lot of the major stars of the Indianapolis office, but that's probably where he got the talent. Penny Banner, although St. Louis may have been involved there also. The Corsica brothers probably were in Tennessee at that point. So I would say Indianapolis hadn't taken over completely at this time. I would say this would be, and you're not going to be able to tell me because you don't know, although I can tell you how we can find out.
Yeah, there's more clues here.
Well, I'm going to say this already. I can tell you this could be 1957 or 58, I think, because it would be early on in his run. And go ahead. What were you going to say? Give me more clues.
Yeah, a few things, because one of them surprised me that it was in here because it threw me off with one of the other things. But just a few notes from the program. The injured list continued from last week's program. Leo the Lion Newman, known to Louisville fans, will never wrestle again due to a car accident en route to a wrestling match.
He later became a top manager.
That's right. Carried by AP News last Friday in your newspaper report, Bulldog Danny Pletchus and his tag team partner Kurt Von Poppenheim injured in a car accident en route to Denver, Colorado from Albuquerque, New Mexico to take part in a wrestling bout. Reports say not serious, and both should be back in action very soon. Champion Dick Hutton is referenced here, so Dick Hutton's the NWA champion.
Okay.
This is what threw me off, because of Hutton being there as the NWA champion and then seeing this at this point. Football players go to wrestling. Alex Karras, University of Iowa's twice All-American, signed $25,000 pro mat pact as wrestler with Pinky George, Des Moines sports promoter, to wrestle 6 months out of the year, as he is the #1 draft choice of the Detroit Lions pro football team. That's a sentence there, okay. Also of Greek descent, hopes to fill Jim Landis' shoes by becoming world champion. And then it goes into some history there, but I think I didn't realize Alex Karras' name would have been there so early, actually.
Well, you didn't. Well, see, that's how that they got the idea for the deal with Bruiser in Detroit in what, 1962?
Right, several years later, yeah.
Because they knew that he'd been trained, because he was a hotshot college football name, and Pinky George had signed him to an early contract and given him some training, but it didn't pan out. I don't think he liked it, nor was he necessarily very good at it, and stuck with football. But then when he was playing in Detroit and Bruiser was hot and they had the idea, and there you go. And it didn't work out well. And Karras, I don't think, did any more wrestling. But Dick Hutton being the champion, that would be 1957, wouldn't it?
Yeah, Gene Kaninsky, the Canadian Avalanche, one of, if not the top money earner last year, being an eager beaver, says he can beat, this is written so weird, says he can beat 2 former world champions in 1 hour in St. Louis, March 28th. They are Bill Longson and Whipper Watson. Wow, that's interesting.
Wow, they were pushing Kaninsky, 2 of the biggest names of all time, the biggest draws of all time, in a handicap match against one new kid.
And they're building him up for a match against Dick Hutton. And again, the fact that there's so much St. Louis heavy stuff in here, you picked up on it early. It seems like St. Louis is really involved here.
Yeah, well, a lot of the Louisville talent came from St. Louis or the Nashville booking office, even through the days of the Allen Athletic Club and into Francis McDonough running the show. But that's why it was kind of a shift when Francis McDonough, and a lot of this I've gotten from John Cosper's incredible research, and we're going to talk about it on The Experience this week. He did a revamped 10th anniversary edition of Bluegrass Brawlers with twice as much information on Louisville wrestling history.
Nice. Very cool.
But the point is, Barnett kind of snuck in and took Louisville and kind of did the same thing with Indianapolis, which Sean Delaney's been doing the great research on Evansville for his 400 Court Street podcast. But a lot of the talent in Louisville and Evansville came from the St. Louis office until the late 50s, and Barnett started annexing things. And sometimes the local promoter had to be changed and or run out of the picture. In Louisville, it was easier because the guy died. But yes, this was still St. Louis influence. And also, I mean, all respect to Penny Banner and Corsica Joe and Corsica Gene, but this was not a big card, and the glory days of Louisville wrestling kind of ended with Francis McDonough's death, and then Barnett really was never able to make Louisville a go. They didn't consider it a priority. It didn't get big cards. TV was jerked around a lot. We had Chicago TV for a while, but that's finally why that they pulled out and it went dark after 1965 or so, and Jarrett was able to revitalize things in 1970.
For the listeners out there who don't know of them, what can you say about the Corsica brothers?
I didn't actually get to see them in their prime. Corsica Joe was more famous in modern era Tennessee wrestling for being the guy who, sat back in the back at the Nashville Fairgrounds. He was married to Sarah Lee, the female wrestler, and she helped Christine Jarrett sell tickets. And Corsica Joe was the guy that sat back and watched the back door. But the Corsican brothers, especially in the Tennessee territory, but they'd worked Florida, they'd worked Texas, the Midwest in the 50s, all over the country. But for 15 or 20 years, they were a very highly sought after team, and they drew tons of money in Tennessee with Don and Al Green and the Von Brauners and some of the, mass tag teams like, the Infernos. They were, oh, God damn it. Where were they from? They were French, but it was like a French, Corsica, of course, but they were of French descent for real. And so they're, I think, goddamn, was Joe's real last name was something like Petite, like that. But anyway, not too much about their wrestling career, but he was a nice old man. And he was like 80. They did an angle with him on Memphis TV with him and somebody. I can't remember who. I was gone by then.
And of course, Corsica Gene was later murdered. He had a bar in Florida.
That's right. I forgot about that. Somebody came in and knocked the place over and shot him. So that just proves it's better to watch the back door instead of run a bar.
All right, I guess that's a way to look at it.
But yeah, I'm pretty sure you're at 1957 there, by all accounts. But John Cosper, he's done this research. We can ask him. He'll probably weigh in on it. He found the date of the card that my dad went to write a story on it for the Courier-Journal in the late 30s.
Oh, wow.
It's in the newest edition. There were two promoters in Louisville, and one of them was promoting at one of the theaters, which that sounds crazy, but this was the 1930s, and the Armory, the convention center, later the Louisville Gardens, was the only sports arena in town. They did a lot of wrestling early in the 20th century at the Buckingham Theater here and the Gaiety and the Savoy. There were theaters that could seat a couple thousand people. Well, anyway, one of the promoters was running the theater. One of the promoters was running the Armory, but it was getting on warm weather and there was no air conditioning. So they did outdoor matches at a place called Swiss Park. And my dad was in the promotions department working in the office for the Courier-Journal. And he always wanted to write for the paper. And so they milked him. They assigned him, okay, go write a review of the wrestling matches. And he takes his wife at the time, his first wife, and this was 1938, and goes down to Swiss Park and sits down and said, boy, it's an awful sparse crowd. And then the ring announcer, the same person you mentioned, just came out and said, ladies and gentlemen, due to the sparse turnout, the event tonight has been canceled. Watch the newspaper for the date of the next match. Thank you. Refunds at the box office. And he gets up. He's like, well, there ain't no justice. So he wrote an article for the paper on the wrestling matches about not getting to write an article for the paper about the wrestling matches. And I found that in one of his army trunks years after I got interested in wrestling. And, and I put that in the Rags, Paper, and Pens book, but I showed it to Cosper, and come to find out that was the rival promoter's swan song. They canceled and never rescheduled, and it was the end of his line. So, Cornettes and figured in wrestling in Louisville back to the 30s.
You found that article that your dad wrote by happenstance, or it was something that you were told your dad once wrote something about wrestling?
No, I just found it in his stuff. And I was like, he went to the wrestling, and I knew it was the late 30s because of, things that were on the clipping that he didn't really clip it out. He just tore it out. And I knew it was the late 30s just by evidence, but I had no frame of reference until Cosper's done all this research.